Hello and welcome to the Marina Skua Podcast. This is episode 13, which, as this is a monthly podcast, means that it's now been going for a year, which is so exciting. Thank you so much to those of you who have been watching since the beginning and bearing with me while I've been finding my feet with cameras and recording equipment and everything. And to those of you who are new to the podcast, I really hope you enjoy it, and please feel free to go back and watch the previous episodes as well. I am going to be doing a little bit of a giveaway to celebrate the anniversary of the podcast, so keep watching and I'll give some details of that in a bit. I'm also going to be talking about my current knitting projects, a couple of knitting patterns that have either just been released or are just coming out. And I'm going to be dyeing with some calendula that I've harvested from my garden, and towards the end I'm going to be asking, especially for those of you who are knitting designers, as some of you may know if you've been watching before or if you follow me on Instagram or have maybe worked with me before, I'm a tech editor, and I'm in the very early planning stages of creating some resources for designers, so I'd like to chat a bit about that towards the end, and we'll be looking for any kind of opinions or feedback, because that'll be so helpful to create something that'll be really useful for designers. And so yeah, without further ado, let's get going. Currently on my needles, you've just seen in the video just there, I am working on a jumper from my hand spun yarn, I'm almost finished with the sleeves. I've talked about this one in previous episodes. This time I've actually made some progress. And look, it's all tangly. This always happens when I knit sleeves 2 at a time, especially with... It's much easier now that I don't have the hand spun connected, because I'm just doing the cuffs in grey, because I have 100 grams of the hand spun. Well, I started with 100 grams. That's obviously not enough to make a jumper, so I'm alternating with some grey Mendip 4-ply yarn, which is this. It's a lovely naturally grey Shetland yarn. It's got some nice heathery tweediness to it, and I do have skeins of this available on my online shop now, because it's really nice to have a cool toned neutral as well as the white and the beigey coloured neutral I've got in there as well. So I'm really pleased with this, with how this is turning out even. The sleeves definitely don't match, which I always knew was going to be the case. I'm hoping that when it's finished, the sleeves and body and everything, because the colour changes are quite subtle, I'm hoping that it'll all sort of work together nicely. It's going to be quite a nice lightweight jumper, but hopefully really warm, because it's knit in moss stitch with the 2 colours. So I'm just alternating every round. So 1 round in the grey and then 1 round in the hand spun. And then, as I said, I'm doing the cuffs in the grey, and the hem and the neckline will also be in the grey. And so I think that's going to be really pretty. I'm looking forward to getting the sleeves bound off so I can just whiz around on the body, and we'll see how long the body ends up being with the hand spun yarn that I have left over. I mean, there's still a fair amount there. I haven't actually weighed it, and I'm not going to, because it's all just fun. I'm just going to keep using it up and see how it turns out. But I am really enjoying this one. It's nice mindless knitting. I am using a pattern. It's a heavily modified version of the Vanilla Heirloom pattern by Marina Skua, which is a really lovely pattern. Full disclaimer, I tech edited it. It was one of my early tech editing projects, and it was a special one because it's written for, I think it's 8 sizes and then 5 different gauges. So you end up with an enormous amount of numbers when you're checking the pattern. But it means that whatever gauge you're getting from, you know, a very, very fine weight to a very bulky yarn, it has instructions to match your size, which is really nice and super handy, and it means you've got the one pattern which you can make loads and loads of jumpers from in different styles. It's a plain raglan. It's written for stockinette, but I've adapted it for the 2 colour moss stitch. And yes, I am keeping notes on my Ravelry project on the modifications I'm making to that. I've been working on that quite a lot. I was on holiday recently. I went to Amsterdam and Copenhagen, and it was really nice to have a lot of guilt-free knitting time, because even though knitting is kind of work for me sometimes-ish, when I'm designing it is. But this isn't a design, it's just something I'm making because it'll be nice. So it's nice to be able to dedicate some relaxing time to knitting. So lots of cafe knitting, just going round and round on the sleeves, which has been lovely. I also had another project with me, but I'm not going to show you that because it's a secret, and you'll find out about it later in the year. It's a really nice one, I promise. And then I've got these socks, which I've really not done much on. It sort of sits in my handbag. I've done the occasional round in the car or whatever. I've not done loads. And if you want to find out more about them, just check out the last couple of episodes of the podcast, because I think I've talked about them there. And then this is my Ginkgophyte, which is designed by Emily Greene. Just check which is the right side. That's the right side there. Oh, and all the yarn's caught up. I really should detangle my projects before showing them off to people. So you can see there, I'm sort of almost at the end of the back. It's not going to get too much longer. One thing I found really interesting with this project, I don't know if it's just me and my wonky tension and stuff, but the eyelets on one side are much bigger than the eyelets on the other side. So these eyelets here, with the yarn overs, ones there are kind of huge, and these ones are quite neat and tiny. So I don't really know what's going on there. I think it depends on the stitch that follows the yarn over. So if it's whether it's a knit or a purl stitch, I'm just looking at it now and trying to work it out. It's something I've noticed. I'm not hugely bothered. I also think the fact that I'm doing it in plant fibre yarn, so this is Rami, it has zero stretch to it. It's not stiff, it's got a lot of drape to it, and as you can see it's quite floppy. But I think the lack of stretch means it's slightly less forgiving. Like, I know anyone who's knitted with linen will know that it's not very forgiving of any tension, irregularities, or, you know, trying to sneak some shaping in places without it being noticeable. It's always noticeable. So yeah, that's something I found interesting. I had predicted, I think on the last episode, I said that it was going to take me until about October to finish. The fact that I got sidelined and have now been working on 2, kind of 3 other projects means that it's probably going to take much longer. Might not be able to wear it until next year, depending on the weather. I mean, I'm in a thick shirt with long sleeves because even though it's August, it's not particularly cheerful out there. And I've had to wear jumpers, like properly thick jumpers, not just like a nice little summer jumper, like dense warm jumpers in August, and I'm not keen. I love the warm weather. I keep having to remind myself, as I feel the days getting shorter and things getting a bit chillier, I have to remind myself that I love knitting and winter is better for knitting. I can wear more knitwear and you get all the nice cozy feelings, whereas knitting with heavy wool during hot weather isn't so much fun. But yeah, you know. And yes, so in terms of things that are finished, this one, if you've been watching before, you will have seen it. This is my oak moss tee. Again, I would be wearing it, except I need more warmth than it offers. The pattern for this is now out on Ravelry. It is in 12 sizes, so from approximately a 32-inch chest to about 58 inches. That's finished garment size, and it's recommended to be worn with about 1 inch of ease. So yes, I've tried to go for quite a large size range because, you know, everyone should have clothes, and I know a lot of people struggle to find nice knitting patterns for larger sizes, so I'm trying to do that. This is my first garment design. It's not a difficult knit. It's knit in the round up to the underarms. There are some increases there just for the arm shaping. Then it's knit flat. For the back there are some short rows at the shoulders, and then you leave the back neck stitches on hold, wind off the shoulders, and then you work the front. There's an interesting bit of construction on the front neckline which slightly confused some of my test knitters just because it's a bit unusual, but it gives a finish that I really like. and makes it more fun to knit. So if you are interested in knitting it, the pattern's on Ravelry. I'd say the yarn I used is from Woolly Knit. It's a linen cotton yarn, and I'd say it's approximately a sport weight. So I knit this on 3mm needles, which gives quite a dense fabric. Like it's 200 grams. It's fairly dense. It's quite heavy feeling just for a t-shirt, but it's quite nice and cool. And yeah, so the plant fibre yarn means it's quite not stiff, but there's definitely a lot of structure to it, and it's been really interesting seeing where my test knitters have used different yarns, how particularly with the sleeves they have more drape and a slightly more sort of floaty ethereal effect if they've used a yarn with a bit less structure to it. But yeah, so that's really interesting to see. And yep, that's available on Ravelry and on my website. Another one I've got coming up. This one's currently in test knitting. This is the Leoma Shawl. I've mentioned it before, and again, like, it works really nicely. I wear these two together a lot because the colours just happen to work out really nicely. I'm going through quite a sort of, well, it often happens in summer, I go through a sort of tealy, sea foamy phase with my colours, whereas in the autumn and winter I go through much more sort of warm, rich, orangey red tones. But yeah, it's a nice little shawl, quite lightweight. Well, the yarn is DK weight, but this has got lots of yumminess in it. There's some merino wool, there's some silk, there is some linen, and there's some cotton. I think that's all. The yarn is Luma by the Fibre Company. The colours I've used are Blue Dusk and Golden Mossa. And as I said, I'm test knitting this. Test knits are still open. The deadline is in a week's time. So if you're a speedy knitter, you can jump on it, and test knitters get 20% off my online shop plus a free pattern from my Ravelry store, and obviously the finished pattern of the one they're testing for free as well. So if you do like it and you want to test it quickly, then do go ahead and sign up. I'll put the link in the description box below so you can do that. Or, you know, if you just want to be on the list so you hear about future test knits. Yeah. So yes, this one is really nice for texture. It is a speedy knit. Again, it's nice and meditative. It's got moss stitch, which actually all three, apart from the Ginkgophyte, the jumper and the t-shirt and this all have a bit of moss stitch in them because I really like it. I like the texture. I especially like it the way it combines colours and creates sort of shadowy effect. I enjoy that. So yes, those are designs that I have been working on. It is really nice to, you know, I'm still fairly new as a designer. I have been designing knitwear for a very long time, but mostly it's just been my own stuff and making things up and not writing things down and not trying to make them easy to make for other people. But now I'm working on creating things that hopefully other people will be able to and want to knit. And so I'm now in the planning stages of another design. It's a cardigan. I'll show you a swatch here. So the yarn is Erika Knight's British Blue 100. I bought a few skeins of this about 2 years ago. It's completely lovely. It's really, really soft. Like, there's a prevailing opinion that British wool tends to be a bit coarse and only good for carpets and things, which is rubbish. this is Blueface Leicester, which is one of our finest wools. It's completely delightful. I bought this on the Great London Yarn Crawl. I bought 4 skeins of the navy blue and then 1 of the grey, and I like the way that there's just a very subtle contrast between them. Like because I'm doing colour blocking, it shows up a bit better, but yeah. And I did actually meet Erika at the Yarn Crawl. She was doing a pop-up shop, and it was really, really nice to meet her, and she did a talk at the event in the evening, which I found very inspiring, and was one of the things that eventually persuaded me I needed to quit my full-time job and start doing textiles things as what I actually do, rather than just trying to cram it into my evenings. And so for that I am very, very grateful. And so I had started a different design using this yarn, which is why I can't show, like, you know, I've got my yarn in random bags of balls that have been rewound, because I cast it on. I knit actually the whole of the back of a jumper and then decided that it wasn't what I wanted to be making, so I unravelled the whole thing. And that for me is quite a grown-up decision, because I tend to just plough on with things anyway, and I'm gradually getting to the point where I will rip back and start again if something isn't going to be right. So this is going to be a cardigan. Here you go. Cool. So this is going to be at the side seams like that. This is obviously a scaled down version. It's difficult to see because it's dark colours and you're far away. This is stockinette here, and then this is moss stitch. And so once I've finished the jumper that I'm working on, the raglan one with the 2 colours, I'm going to start work on this one. I'm going to be doing some of my maths in the meantime to plan it out, and I'm really excited about it because I haven't made a cardigan for ages and ages, and I love cardigans, but I always get put off from making them by the thought of button bands and doing buttons and all of that sort of thing, and it's not that much of a fuss, but it's sort of enough to be a bit of a mental block for me, which is thoroughly silly. And for some reason, like, I really enjoy knitting jumpers, and so I need to get on and make more cardigans, and I keep spotting things, new things that are coming out on Ravelry, or things that are in my queue, and I just get so tempted by jumpers, but no, it is the age of the cardigan. So I'm going to be including some details on that as I go along. I might share a bit of the process of that design with you. Yeah, I think, you know, people who are more well known as designers tend to worry about ideas being stolen and things, and that might happen to me, but we'll see. I want to make the cardigan anyway, and I really like when other people share their processes, and so I'd like to do the same. So hopefully you'll find that interesting. Sorting out some calendula flowers that I've gathered from the garden. As I've mentioned before, I tend to harvest them just as they're going over, so when the seeds are just beginning to form. This means that I get slightly less colour from each flower, but it means that I get them looking nice in the garden for a little bit longer. And as I have quite a lot of plants, I'm not too worried about the slight reduction in yield. So what I tend to do is just strip off all the petals out on a sheet of paper like this. Try and have a nice spacing between them so they're not all clumped together. And then the seed heads just go into a bag, which then goes into the freezer. I do that because I tried an experiment recently where I was saving them up sort of just in case, and the seed heads themselves actually give quite a nice colour, you know, with the leaves and stalks. I also have some Coreopsis heads in here as well, because I've been collecting the petals over here on a separate sheet. And so, oh, that's my phone. I just strip off the petals, put the seed heads in the bag. A lot of the petals fall off in the pot. This is what I just take a big pot out into the garden and just chuck them straight in as I pick them. That one's got a feather on it. And then anything left in the pot at the end I just empty onto here. So this, having them spaced out like this, means that they have quite a lot of space to dry out, and they're not all clumped together so they don't go mouldy or anything. And again, fresh petals will give better colour than dried, but if I only use fresh petals, then each time I'll only be able to do a smaller batch, and I prefer to do a slightly bigger batch. So yeah, just separate these out. It takes a long time. It's not a super efficient way of doing it, and I'm doing this to save up a big batch of just petals to see the difference in colour between the petals themselves and the seed heads. After this batch, I will probably just freeze the whole flower and not bother stripping the petals off. But I want to see first whether there is actually a difference in colour given by the petals and the seed heads, and whether it's stronger by weight of dye stuff. I mean, it's probably not particularly useful information. I imagine the colour won't be significantly different because I've already done a dye batch using the supposed waste material. And that turned out a lovely golden yellow. So it'll be interesting to see and compare. So all in all, I've got about 150 grams of petals. These are the ones I've just processed, as well as ones I've been collecting over the last couple of months. So you can see I've got quite a nice amount there. I'm going to just pour boiling water over them. And recently I've been making my dye fats in slightly smaller batches and then straining it and then adding more water to the same petals rather than just putting it all in a bigger pot and stewing it up with more water. And I seem to find that that gives a little bit more colour and means that you can get stronger colour out of the first batch and then subsequent ones, and it means you don't end up just with lots and lots of quite weak dye solution. So that's turning a tiny bit yellow there. I'm going to add a fair bit more water and then I will put it on the hob to heat for a while, and while I'm doing that I will mordant up my yarn. So I'm going to be doing 3 skeins because they're 50-gram skeins, and that will be the same weight of yarn as petals, which is what I usually find to be a good starting point for natural dyes if you aren't quite sure what strength to use. 1 to 1 tends to be a good place to start. So, results are in on the calendula dye, and I have to say I am mildly disappointed. This is the yarn here. It's a nice colour, there's no denying that. It's just not as strong as I was hoping for. If I compare it to the yarn that I dyed with the calendula and coreopsis heads, so just the green parts, that's that one. And this is the one I've just done with the petals, and I'm slightly surprised. I was expecting a bit more of a yellowy colour from this one. But in a way that's really good news, because it means that there is literally no point in me separating the petals from the flower heads. I can just chuck the whole lot in the freezer and then dye with it all at once, and hopefully that will give me a colour that's closer to this than this. Next time, well, I'm going to be trying a similar experiment just with the coreopsis petals, because I already have a lot separated out, so I'm going to try that, see how it goes. And then going forward we'll probably just use the whole flower heads. As well as these ones, I had a couple more batches going. So this one is really fun, sort of acidy yellow, if I show compared to those. You can see it's a very, very cool colour. And this is just from brambles, the ones that have been invading my garden from the neighbours, and prunings from my privet hedge that I've got out the front of the garden. So I'm fairly pleased with that. I didn't even weigh the dye stuff for these. I did just chuck what I had into the pot to see how it would go. So that's quite nice. And then this one is very, very subtle. This is a tea exhaust batch. So I did a stronger batch before, and this is the second batch. So it's a very, very soft colour. So yeah, they're quite fun. I think those work quite nicely together. And then those. I have a feeling this one would be slightly difficult to combine with my sorts of colours, just because it is such a cool toned yellow rather than a warm toned one. And with yellows and colours like this, I do prefer warmer colours. I then have a couple of skeins which I thought I'd show you. And get them from under my knitting here. These were from an experiment that I did a couple of weeks ago. I have been growing woad in the garden, but a combination of various factors, poor germination and caterpillars and slugs, mean that I don't actually have a huge amount. So I decided to do a quick experiment with a salt extraction, which is this one, and then using my normal method, which is this one. And I'm really quite pleased with these. Like, this is a really nice sort of almost sea foamy blue, and then this is a very clean pale pink. And it's really quite pleasing. If you want details on the process for these ones, I've written a blog post which has lots and lots of photos, and the method is quite easy. So if you can get hold of some fresh woad, it's one I recommend trying, and I will put a little link down in the description box below to where you can find the blog post. But yes, so this is really encouraging, and I'm definitely going to be growing more woad in the garden next year. Now that I've got some more space dug in the garden, I will have a little bed just dedicated to woad, and I might have to net it to prevent the butterflies from laying their eggs in there and the whole thing getting overrun by caterpillars, because we've had loads of fun with caterpillars this year. Right, giveaway time. So as a thank you to the people who enjoy my channel, I'm going to do a little giveaway. I'm going to give 2 skeins of my Mendip DK yarn in a colour of your choice, plus a free copy of any one of my patterns from my Ravelry store. This is just a random selection of colours that I have picked that I particularly enjoyed today. You can either do it so that you choose the 2 colours you'd like. Of course, you can have 2 of the same colour, or you can say surprise me, and if you want to give an Instagram account or something of yours that I can have a look at, I can then try and pick out colours I think you like. Otherwise, I will send random ones that I like, just to add a little bit of mystery for those who enjoy it. I'm going to be adding official rules in the description box below, so as hopefully not to enrage the YouTube gods, and this is open worldwide. All you have to do to enter is be subscribed to the channel and add a comment on this video saying either something you particularly enjoy about the podcast, something you'd like to see more of in the future, or if you have a question that you'd like me to answer. If it's a quick one, I might answer in the comments. If I get lots of questions, I might do a little segment in the next podcast episode. I will then contact that person. Whoever wins, it'll be picked randomly. I'll be putting names in a hat. I'll contact that person and ask them for their address so that I can send them the skeins of yarn. and I will not be using that address for any other purposes because I'm not creepy like that. So yes, I hope that that's something that will be interesting and that you'd like some yarn to play with. And you know, I don't get a huge amount of traffic, so your chances of winning if you comment are actually pretty good. So I'd say give it a go. At the beginning of this episode, I mentioned, perhaps slightly cryptically, that I'm putting together some resources for designers from a tech editing point of view. And so I wanted to check with knitwear designers if you had any questions for a tech editor or for someone who has seen a lot of knitwear patterns and helped get them out into the world. If there are any questions you have, if there are any difficulties you've experienced in designing, not from a creative point of view, but from a technical standpoint, so in terms of pattern writing, the actual putting together of the pattern, technical writing, how to work with spreadsheets, all that kind of thing. If you have any questions or anything that you've maybe been intimidated by or have avoided doing, or you've been doing it but think there's probably a way to do it more efficiently, I'd love to hear about all those kinds of things. You can either leave a comment here on the video, or if you'd rather keep it private, you can send me a message on Instagram, or you can email me at hello@marinaskua.com. So that is the end of this month's episode. I want to thank you so much, as always, for joining me, whether you're a new watcher and this is your first episode, or whether you've been watching for a long time. It's always so lovely to share what I'm working on with you. If you want to keep up with what I'm doing in between episodes, you can subscribe to my newsletter on my website. You'll be the first to know about shop updates, new products, pattern launches, and I usually include nice little bits of tips, and there's usually a little bit of seasonally inspired poetry and stuff as well. If you just go to my website, there's a pop-up there and you can just sign up straight away. I'm also on Instagram, Ravelry, Facebook, Pinterest. I'm Marina Skua on all of those. And if you want to help support the podcast and help me allow the time to film, you can donate a little bit on Ko-fi. I'll put a link for that below as well. And it's always appreciated, those who donate, and of course it's completely optional. I'm not going anywhere, but it does help me make a little bit of time for recording. And so until next time, bye bye.